Welcome to Scythe and Shield, a GrindExp Diablo 3 podcast. Hello, I am Dr J Dredscythe, and I'll be leading you through this wandering adventure through great discussions with great people, larger topics of the day, but also, take a crowbar to that BattleTag, beat that BattleTag up, see who's underneath that thing, and maybe get to know who's underneath it a little bit more than you did before the podcast started. So with that, I would like to say, a scholar's tale is never complete, for the story is always being written. The journey through hacking demon hordes, leveling one's knowledge of strategy, and using it to teach others, obtaining precious items, increasing the limits of potential without boundaries. V has done well, with courage and fortitude, a true hero of Sanctuary. For that, I am honored and welcome Neingball to the show. Hello, Neingball.
Guten Tag. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you this wonderful night?
I am doing pretty well. That's quite the build-up on the intro there. I hope I can live up to it.
Yeah, I like to embarrass my interviewers a little bit by building them up. But I think each one has earned their merit, and then some.
Oh, I thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, what has been going on? What's been real in the world of Neinball past couple of days?
Well, let's see. Past couple of days, I guess just stuff not terribly too interesting. I had a bunch of friends over yesterday. And because basically I was being forced into trying to catch up with Game of Thrones. So I'm now, I'm halfway through season 2 now, thanks to some binge watching.
Netflix loves you.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, because we watched it on Netflix. That was probably one of the bigger things. And then Saturdays is usually my Warhammer day. So I've been going over to the local hobby shop playing a bunch of Warhammer 40k. That's the tabletop, getting super nerdy and geeky there. Mm-hmm. And of course, trying to find time in my schedule to, of course, go and keep up with Diablo 3, even though 2.1's coming out soon, and with seasons everything is for naught. But it's still don't care. I need to get my character perfected before then.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly on that last little statement. I was saving this without telling you before the show. I was trying to hold it in, but now I am a wizard. I would say proud to be a wizard, but I accomplished something yesterday that's making me kind of rethink that. Just a tinge. Oh. I actually have a demon hunter that is full-on Sentry pet build, and nice. I managed to get my first pair of Tasker and Theos, but I don't need any other pair because it is a trifecta high dex roll pair. So I got very, very lucky, and I took a couple other pieces of gear, and I was able to solo Torment 6 Rift all by myself, and I only died like 2 times, so I was very happy with that accomplishment.
That is very good. So I take it you have the full Marauders set to back that up?
Yes, full 6-piece Marauders with the Ring of Road Grandeur. Have the Bombardier, so I got 5 sentries, which is disgusting. Anyone, if you doubt the power of 5 sentries over 3, there's no other way to say besides it's disgusting. It's like if you know when a Rift Guardian is going to pop, you get all 5 sentries out ahead of time. You pop the Rift Guard and you just lure them into the sentries, and they do all the work for you. It is maddeningly. You almost want to laugh half the time because you just don't believe this build with these items, even though they are a pain to get, can be this fun.
Yeah, they are quite the grind. That is what I've only gotten 1 piece of Marauders on my Demon Hunter, and it's something that I'm definitely striving for. So I am jealous. I am definitely jealous.
I want to give you pieces. because it's bad because my wizard has a dedicated stash tab to extra items, and my demon hunter now has a full stash tab of just dedicated items for it. It's like I just want to give them away. I want other people to experience the fun that is the demon hunter sentry build, and it's I feel I'm at like a weird standing point too because my I have two wizards. One is a Veer's Elementalist build with Tarajas and the Veer, and then the second one is the Wand of Woe Explosive Blast full-on cooldown reduction of like 51% build. But neither one can do like Torment really 5 or 6 solo. So, but they're so high in the gear, it's like that. Oh, I need the same piece of gear, just better stats on all of them. So that's why I think I went over to the Demon Hunter, which now is all the more stronger.
Which is the best class in the game. I am 100% non-biased in that statement whatsoever.
I'll raise one finger to that, not all 5. I'll raise that because I am enjoying it.
Yeah. If I may make a suggestion, though. With the full 6-piece set of Marauders, Tasker and Theo is actually not the best thing for you. If you're going with the fire build, where you're using the Spitfire turrets, you might actually get a little bit more out of using a pair of Mage Fists. Or actually this is something that we just went over in a recent episode of Westmarch Workshop, and there's something that was pointed out to me later after the show that I hadn't even considered was the hexing pants. Since you never actually have to stop yourself if you don't want to interact or actually shoot too much yourself, you can wear the hexing pants and run around, and all of your turrets will be doing the extra 20% damage from the hexing pants bonus. That whenever you move, you're doing just everything just gets obscene. Because the Tasker and Theos don't increase the cooldown timer for the 6-piece set bonus, which shoots the spenders.
Yes, that would actually, in all things Blizzard, that probably makes more sense than not. So I'll give you that.
It's actually it's something that I only found after going through and having to dig in the forums and like the Demon Hunter subreddit. That's there are people having these really in-depth conversations about it and have found that attack speed on the Tasker and Theo doesn't affect that internal cooldown, and just having that multi-shot and the loaded for bear being fired does a lot more damage than the individual shots that the Spitfire turrets are putting out. So by boosting that up even more just gives you a little bit more DPS. And so there's nothing absolutely, you're soloing tier 6, so this is just a comment of adding a little bit more flavor, because you can't really get any better than that. But just something, it's definitely something to try out, that Mage Fists, or especially the Hexing Pants, can add that little bit more oomph to it.
Yeah, I did get one pair of Hexing Pants, but it was for a wizard, which I realized even with the Explosive Blast build, you have to really be doing a damage for it to make it up. It's really hard just to keep on moving. Like, you want to attack. So the Demon Hunter would probably be one of the best beneficiaries, but I have to wait for a Dex 1 to drop, when that would ever happen, of course. And I do have 2 Mage Fish, but they're not trifectas. So I'll wait. Once I get a trifecta one, I'll slap it in. And I'll give it a go.
That is the one thing that I can say, and I have, even though I only have one piece of Marauders, I found a really nice Cinder Coat, and I found a wonderful pair of Trifecta Mage Fists just last week, and so that will hold me through with just my standard Cluster Arrow build until I start finding some more pieces of Marauders. So I have that going for me, at least.
Alright, so yeah, I think that covers a lot of what we've been doing. Oh my god, so much Demon Hunter talk. I can just hear it now. Nevik is gonna be like,
one of us.
Like,
one of us.
He's like, hey, Dred, you're leaving the wizard boat too, aren't you? Like, no, Nevik, not like you. You're gonna be a monk.
No, he's mine now. Back off.
I've joined the literal dark side.
Hell yeah. We've got hatred and cookies.
It's always cookies, those damn cookies.
Well, because the cake is a lot. You have to offer something other than the cake.
Alright, yes. Pie. Humble pie.
Well, there'll be none of that here.
No, of course not. Alright, so let's transition over a little. Now, for those who are just tuning in, this is your first Scythe and Shield adventure. Glad to have you aboard. The way this interview works is there's 3 segments. There's the first segment, which is basically a list of standard questions I ask everybody. You know, try to get a little history behind the individual person themselves. The second part is called the best of times, worst of times. These are just random questions meant to stun and amaze and make the interviewees go, "Oh, really? Give me a second." And lastly is the heart of the matter, which for this particular podcast will be continuing on from our last one with Dross Vader, which was 2.1 tiered rifts and seasons, where that's the future Diablo 3, where it's going. This one is going to be along the same lines where Diablo is going, but from the story, the lore aspect, and where that could push possible lore points for not only your character as it stands right now, but also what the game would actually be, especially with the ending, which we'll be discussing, spoilers, as well as possible new classes being added to the game, because who knows what lore they may try to throw at us. And the Crusader was such a crucial part of Reaper Souls, they may try to do the same thing with the next expansion, which would be derived from the story. So with that, we'll move into the first segment, and the like questions. So, where does your name come from, and is there any history behind it?
There is a little bit of history behind it, even though obviously I spell it Neinball as in, German no ball, and that of course has led to many hilarious antics of people, calling out my name and such. But it originally comes from a video game circa 1997 called Armored Core, and the main antagonist in that game is Neinball. This is a mech combat game. It's not so much Mech Warrior, but a more Japanese style, since it was actually made by a Japanese company. So it's really fast mechs that you can go through and shoot around everybody. And Neinball was just the main bad guy, and this was back, but they weren't forums, they were message boards. So it was very, very long time ago in the early days of the internet. And, tons of people would mark themselves as Neinball or whatever, just because we're teenagers, who cares? And in order to try and differentiate myself, I just kind of did it as a play on words, spelling it 9 instead of 9, and it's just stuck with me. It's just something that I've been using ever since then, and it's unique, so it's not really like I have to compete with people on that particular name, and that's pretty much the history behind it. I've used it ever since then. Thank you, Armored Core.
Yes, forum PHP boards, GeoCities all the way.
GeoCities.
That's where that's where I did my first Perfect Dark and StarCraft fan site. The memories.
Wow, was it a Perfect Dark in StarCraft fan site together? Because that would have been a very interesting combination.
No, they were totally different. That's a thought. Wow. I'm trying to prevent my mind from trying to go off that tangent. Like, what if the Zealots were really Joanna? Like, no, let's not go down that way.
Imagine if she got into the Ghost program.
We just gave Blizzard a whole nother franchise in like 10 years.
It'd be like StarCraft Ghost. They could even make it like a first-person shooter based on StarCraft.
Don't they have an idea on the shelf about that? Sorry, folks. We tangent. All right.
Yes, yeah, that's the joke.
Mm. All right. Next question is, how old are you, if you dare, and what is your profession, your work, and/or study?
For me, I will be a very old man soon, so I am turning 30 in August.
I'll be
yeah.
right behind you in January.
Oh, there we go. And as far as my profession and study, that is a very long tail. I've done almost everything. I've been a server at a seafood restaurant. I worked in retail for a very good number of years, and I've was a head file clerk at a law office for a couple of years, and had some experience with discovery and stuff in litigation. And currently, I'm actually working as an office manager for a small IT firm here in South Florida, and that's what I've currently been doing, kind of taking on that aspect of have some managerial experience along with pretty good strong background in IT, so I can do payroll, I do all the scheduling for all the technicians, do inventory, all that other types of much boring stuff. And then when it comes down to it, what normally ends up happening is I have all the techs out in the field, and then I'm stuck doing all the repairs in the shop. So it gets fun. Let's call it that. It gets fun.
Physics is fun.
Yeah.
It seems like quite a load. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess from there, I have a pretty strong background in I guess the sciences, as I was grew up and through grade school. I was in magnet program for environmental sciences and such, and that kind of instilled a love of just the physical sciences and such. And growing later in life, I discovered this wonderful thing called physics, and it just it's kind of been my obsession ever since then. Just space and all things science fiction and super nerdy, geeky mathematics stuff.
Yeah, that's. Even though I do not go down the physics rail, I think I was abused in college by physics and math, because I do AutoCAD drafting, and I don't have to do the big number engineering like the real thermodynamics, fluid mechanics, physics, heat transfer, all those wonderful terms that are way too loaded for people who don't know better. Like you only know how bad it is once it's too late to get out. But there's definitely a wonderment to it all. Like once you start understanding something, and please let me not chop up his name. Neil deGrasse
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I did chop it up. -1 nerd point for me. He does a wonderful job of just like explaining things, and I'm always left in like childhood awe of just how simple and yet always how we can make ourselves seem so insignificant in the pale of the universe.
Yeah, but I think that harkens back to kind of Neil deGrasse Tyson's pseudo protege, Carl Sagan, that we should at least be humbled by the aspect that despite with how small and insignificant we are here with which to perceive things. So it's we have that going for us, and there's a certain spirituality that can be found in it. So it's kind of a beautiful little sentiment.
Yes, and I do remember that. And leapfrogging from that statement, since you set it up perfectly for yourself, was there a particular person that got you into the game?
Let's see. This one, there's a couple of, I guess, like, let's call them touch points. There was a girl in one of my computer classes, like in the 11th grade. This is
wait. You're saying a girl?
Yes. There was a girl gamer back in my high school days. It wasn't the 11th grade. It was 1999. It was before Diablo 2 came out, but it was the year after StarCraft had came out. Brood War had already been released, and that was like my first experience. And because she was playing it in the computer lab during one of the classes, I'm like, what the hell is that? And she's like, oh, it's StarCraft. It's like, oh, that is awesome. And that got me addicted to StarCraft as a Blizzard game. And then I had another friend a couple months later that introduced me to Diablo on the PS1. That was my very first experience with the Diablo franchise, and because he was like, oh, it's a Blizzard game. Oh, well, StarCraft is like the greatest thing ever. This has got to be cool. And so, but then obviously it was the PS1, so it was a kind of painful experience trying to play it on something that wasn't really designed to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of fun for what it is, but it was kind of boring, compared to some of the other games that we had, and just wasn't, the interface was just difficult to cycle through and such. And after that, I actually finished up grade school in Europe. And when I came back, a couple of my friends had gotten addicted to Diablo 2. And this was, 2002 when I had gotten back into the US. So Lord of Destruction had been out. I never got to play D2 Classic by itself. And it was just, what's that game that you're playing? It's Diablo 2. And it's like, oh, I remember that from the PS1. And, just kind of that elicited some funny looks. And I went through and started playing it from there. And the rest of that point is history, because Diablo 2, that's like one of those hallmarks in gaming that everyone kind of looks up to, and that just took off from there. And I even remember going back and looking up character builds and things like that on the old Diablo, what was it, DiabloII.net or DII.net, which later is now, of course, DiabloandGamers.com. And I just would go there and read everything that I could on all of the forums. And Flux did some just amazing articles back then on strategy for, Sorceress, as well as just talking about the game. That kind of really got me into it. And I started to become, part of that community, and eventually started doing podcasts over there with Flux. And I still do with them over at Ink Gamers. And he was definitely a very big player in helping really build up that passion that I have for the game nowadays.
That is quite a long tale. Well, not a long tale. I want to. Sorry, don't want to sound like I was bored. No, that's actually good. No, because
it's okay. You can be bored. I'm told I rant a lot, so that's
because some people will say nope, I just found it in the game one day. I'm like, okay, next question. Mm-hmm. No, it was that's actually really good, because I was kind of similar way with a couple of other people. It's great to hear someone that had a similar experience with Diablo. Nice to know there's a shared experience out there with what you had with the game.
Yeah, so it was kind of a long drawn out thing, and somewhere in the middle of all of that, of course, there's many countless of months of playing World of Warcraft too. But we can just keep this on Diablo.
Yeah, we've all been there. Yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah, it's hard to get away from it.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, you kind of answered two questions in one, so that's great. So we'll keep this thing moving along. What has kept you going through all the years playing the game?
Just Diablo 3 or the Diablo franchise in general?
The whole franchise.
So obviously, Diablo 1, unfortunately, was that was kind of a miss for me, given I didn't even, at that point in time, I really didn't even know that it was out for the computer. I just thought it was a PS1 game. So, bash on me all that you want. Diablo 2 ate up just a huge significant portion of my time, because that was just amazing. You could do anything that you wanted, be anything that you wanted. I want to be a assassin that has whirlwind, so you could do almost any combination that you could dream up, you could do. I'm going to be a sorceress that runs around as a bear and mauls things to death with my fire claws. It was beautiful. So it had that thing going for it, that it was always something different, and that kept me going. In addition to, say, it's been over a decade now, I've wanted to roll a perfect poison necromancer, and for that you need a Death's Web wand. And if anyone that's a fan of mine that's listened to any of my podcasts over the years knows that this is like the one thing that I always go back to is the Death's Web. And I never found one. I never even saw. There was people that botted, like they'd have 7 bots running 24 hours a day, and they said, "Well, if I find one, I'll give it to you." Years gone by, and none of them ever found one. It was just so ridiculously rare, partially due to the way the itemization of those high-end items worked in the Diablo 2. You could only find them in particular spots. But that was like one of those big draws. It's like, I've got to have that item. And it's just always constantly going through in the back of my mind. Every time a unique one drop, pick it up. No, Leorix. No, Leorix. It's just always wanted to try and get that. I never got to do that perfect poison necromancer that I always wanted to, because I always lacked that item. But it was just kind of a draw of always being something better or something new to try out that kept me going with Diablo 2. Pretty much, literally, almost up until the launch of Diablo 3, because even though it would be one of those things, World of Warcraft kind of dominated a lot of the time, and it would be a couple months maybe with the start of a new season. I'd go back and play for a month or two, and right before Diablo 3 launch, it was just one of those ones. It's me and a bunch of my friends got together, and it's like, we're just going to do as much as we possibly can. And we went through, we wrecked it, we did Pandemonium, we started farming torches and trading torches and doing all ridiculous types of crap. And I remember the last thing that I rolled in Diablo 2 was a Rifteson, and I was just amazing. If anyone still plays Diablo 2, go to Ink Gamers or just do a search on the web. It's called a Rifteson or a Rift Assassin build for Diablo 2. It is amazing. You'll have so much fun with it. And then, of course, going into Diablo 3, it had its fair share of problems at launch with just high-end tuning and kind of in-game progression that was a little bit lacking, but it still was fun, and it had a certain draw to it that a lot of other games didn't, in terms of just, you had smooth combat. And even though it suffered from kind of a lack of variety of builds with how scaling was with the MP system that was later added in, it still was, had a nice, jungling of play styles. If you hopped between classes, you could get a variety of different ways that you could play. And so I had a lot of fun, just leveling up new characters, getting them to 60, kind of getting them partially geared out, having just fun with friends. And eventually, I ended up going and trying to take it, kick it up a notch, and I started rolling hardcore for the first time. I was one of those people that I don't think that I could handle the loss. I would put all these hundreds of hours into a character and get all this great gear, and then all of it just be gone in an instant. But I was wrong. I enjoyed it. The thrill and the rush of going through and playing hardcore it more than compensates for the sadness that you feel when you lose that character that's had all the gear or all those Paragon levels. And it's just you get over it. And after the first couple of deaths, it was more just one of those ones that you just accept my character is going to die, so I shouldn't get too attached to it. But at the same time, I'm more attached to that character than you could ever really be if you've only ever played softcore. Because you go through and you play, and it's just, where those frozen orbs are. Where the safe zones. I can't go back this way any further because I'm going to get backed into a corner. They're going to surround me with the arcane beams and the wallers, and I'm going to die. So it's always having this constant awareness of what you're doing, and the want to defeat anything, because if you don't, is game over. You lose your character when you die. You can't make any mistakes. So you definitely form this very strong connection to the character that you're playing, because you don't want to lose them. But at the same time, you're accepting if you do die. And so obviously the thing that always gets thrown out is, oh, well, you just lose it to a disconnect. I know very few people that have actually died to disconnects. It's normally something's happened. Either, you're playing when you're tired and you make a mistake, or you just got, kind of a, quotations, unfair fight that you just weren't really ready for, either the increase or difficulty, or you got hit by 3 elite packs at once and didn't have an escape strategy in order to get out of it, and you lost your character. So yeah. It's one of those ones. Your deaths never really feel cheap or you never really feel cheated in your deaths. You kind of realize what went wrong and what you can build upon it next time. And it's that rush and that feeling that's kept me going with the game since then. And, just besides the fact of all the great stuff that came out in Reaper of Souls and all the wonderful things that they've done with the game since then and that they're planning to do with 2.1 and tiered rifts in the future, just the experience of playing hardcore and that adrenaline rush you get when you drop down to 20% health is it's a feeling that like no other game really can come close to, besides unless you're like in a highly competitive game like maybe a MOBA or RTS or a first-person shooter where you're actually playing with like something on the line, like a tournament or something along those lines. It's that type of feeling. It's really intense, and something that even if you don't think hardcore is for you, you should give it a shot and see if it is, because I was one of those people in the beginning that thought so, and I ended up loving it. You might love it too, and something that don't dismiss it until you try it. And if you do try it and don't like it, by all means, more power to you. You at least gave it a shot. I don't think anything less of you for wanting to go back to softcore after losing your first character.
I agree with everything you said.
I get on a soapbox when we start talking about hardcore. So I know you've already done that in a previous podcast on the state of hardcore. Sorry for getting up there, but I love preaching to the church of hardcore.
No, you know what? I actually welcome it, because even though I may not be personally for hardcore, or well, as we were talking right before we started the show, Ninepad and Cyberwolf, the two people who I interviewed for that podcast, actually are helping me get up to a level 70 hardcore on a wizard. And they said, God help you for picking a wizard in hardcore. I'm like, oh, yeah, Witch Doctor, right? No, I can't roll the inferior intellect class. Ooh, sorry, I said that out loud.
I don't know about that. The Witch Doctor is pretty disgusting right now, and they're even more so from a hardcore aspect, because they have almost all the damage that a wizard does and like 10 times the survivability. It's disgusting. I
think I just saved that to save my wizard card from the Demon Hunter. But we'll just we'll just glance over that fact. But no, I welcome, because from what it seems like initially, you see, I won't say hardcore players. I'm gonna get on a soapboxes. I'm more of a all-around observationalist when it comes to these kind of games, and it seems like hardcore players weren't really given an out in Reaper of Souls. It's like, yeah, you get all the content, you get everything. Softcore does. But there was no real, I don't want to say extra incentives for like disconnects or stuff like that. But then I guess as you go through it, as you just said, like, yeah, you just begin to accept it. Like, you sign that charter. Mm-hmm. You take the good with the bad. Like, you take every disconnect that happens to go for you with everyone that doesn't. You take every good with the bad. You take every moment that you got away when it was laggy. When you should have died, and you just roll with the punches. So I've kind of come around to the concept of hardcore itself, and I would actually implore more people play hardcore, because I think hardcore gives players, if they do go through it, a better appreciation for the game in general, a better appreciation for build making, itemization, do with what you have, not with what you wish you have. Mm-hmm. And go from there and be a better player. I think that's the aspiration of really any game developer or any person who may be in our standpoint, is when we share knowledge or we explain why it's better to do this and that. It's not because we're trying to necessarily dictate to those people, but we're just trying to make the person a better player, so when they learn and they get up to that, say, critical mass of knowledge, they can pass it on to other people. I think at the end of the day, that's what we all really want from each other and would like to do for each other.
Oh yeah, of course. And yeah, I mean, just kind of going back to one of your points there about, hardcore not really getting anything in Reaper. We got everything that softcore did, and it's not like there's any really thing that's special just for softcore. And so, I mean, playing hardcore is the reward itself. We opt in to playing this particular mode for that type of experience, and that's all, most hardcore players want. We're not really doing it to be elitist, and we're not doing it to like wear a little shiny badge on our shoulder going through and saying, "Oh, look what I did," or anything like that. It's more just we play it because we enjoy this type of play. We don't need anything extra on top of that. We just, of course, we'd like to be considered a little bit when there's balance decisions or future content being made, so that way, like if a PvP is throwing out there, if that ever actually becomes a thing, that considerations are made for the hardcore community, like what they did with brawling, and that you can die infinitely in brawling and hardcore, because if they implemented PvP with permanent death for hardcore, there would be no hardcore PvPers. So it's just, little things like that is like the only concessions that, the majority of the hardcore community would ask for.
Yeah, agreed. Even though it would be pretty weird if they had like D2 style PvP, where if you did dare go in, hey, you got everything off the body.
Uh-huh.
But that's a topic for a whole another podcast. If it should ever happen.
Definitely. Yeah. So just throwing it out there. It's an idea, some sort of far future thing.
Mm-hmm. All right. With that, we have come to a close of the first segment, and we now will go into the second. Now I'll try to spit these out as clearly and as quickly as possible, and I'll try to get as quick of a response from you, and we'll go on to the other one.
Okay.
So we give ourselves plenty of time to talk about the main juicy topic after. So with that, cue drum roll. Oh yeah, by the way, these were made especially for you.
Oh boy.
Yeah. All right. Number 1, if you could be any lore figure besides Deckard Cain, who would it be?
Any figure in lore, I would probably have to say Zale, because he's a badass.
Okay. We will move on. Second question. Do these quick. What wonderful piece of Wirt's body will we find next?
I would have to say, given Blizzard's sense of humor, we probably will find his fourth leg in the future.
I'm banking on the other ear.
Uh-huh.
the fake ear this time, or however it works. Like Van Gogh over here. All right, number 3. If you could be trapped in any item, what would it be?
A Herodric cube. That one's easy. Because you'd have space to stretch out, but then they throw in a potion, and suddenly you're the Kool-Aid man.
It's kind of like the Diablo equivalent of being a genie in a bottle.
Yeah.
Okay, now this may bring up bad memories, but what death in hardcore do you feel was most deserved?
What death in hardcore do I feel is most deserved? Mine personally, or one in general?
Either or, whatever comes up first.
I guess the death that's most deserved of mine, I'll probably go through and say it was my second monk that I lost. I was stupid, and I had turned the game up to Monster Power 10 because I could handle anything, and I got killed by a level 11 elite, trying to rescue Deckard Cain. Yeah, I just got killed by a regular unburied that just knocked me into a corner, and they ganged up on me, and I had no way of getting out. And it was just like, that taught me humility.
Oh, that brings up bad memories. I was in... Okay, granted, so of course, so I came back. But I was in the jail, and a whole bunch of executioners came out of nowhere, just pinned me up against the wall, and just kept on jumping at me. I couldn't get away. Mm-hmm. They did it 3 times in a row. Okay. So, we'll quickly move on to question number 5. If you could, where would you retire in the world of Sanctuary? Keeping in mind the locals.
Yeah, that is a difficult question because no matter where you go, death will stalk you. Hmm. For that one, I would probably say I would want to retire someplace relatively safe. And I feel that one of the safest places in Sanctuary would actually be a city that has not yet been named, and that is the home place of the Necromancers, somewhere out in the jungles of Kyrgyzstan. They have a subterranean city that, even though it's in one of the most deadliest places in the world, I feel that inside those city walls, down below the jungle floor, since that is the home spot of all of the necromancers in existence, it's probably the safest place in all of Sanctuary, and that is where I would like to retire, because then I could probably live out my days relatively long, and then when I die, I could be somebody's scribe buddy. They could just take my skull and, put my soul back into it, and I could chat and, hang out with people, a la Humbard, which goes back to my answer with the first one, which was Zale. For any of the lore fans out there, they'll understand.
I would never have thought. Yeah, I'm just gonna live with the necromancers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
They're a bunch of great people. They're really nice.
Just bring me back if they like me.
Uh-huh.
Okay. This is one I've asked before, and I felt like asking it again. Class you should never play, but feebly try.
Class you should never play, but feebly try. For me, that one has to be the Barbarian. I know it's the most popular class, but for me it was always just so boring. I could never get into playing Barbarians, and so I guess it's one thing that they always, classic, they were super overpowered, and nowadays they at least have one build that they can go through and farm pretty efficiently in Torment 6. So it's something that in my opinion, you shouldn't play because it's boring, but at least feebly try, because you can get stuff done.
Mm-hmm. It's what gets it done, even if it does take a little effort.
or going back on that one, playing a Barbarian in Diablo 2, because that was just a painful experience trying, because you either had to be you either could be a Frenzy Barb and run with a group because you're great at killing bosses, but it took you a month to actually get to anything, or being a Whirlwind Barb where you could clear mobs like nothing, but then it took you a year to kill a boss. So that was always a pain, trying to play a Barbarian in Diablo 2.
Yeah, it always seems to have that polarized aspect to it. Really good in one, suck in the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Never really balanced. Alright, question number 7, the second to last one. What item has absolutely refused to drop for you in reversals?
Well, I'd have to say Marauders. I have more Blackthorns than anyone would care to admit. It is the Eisenhearts of our time. And I've gotten a couple pieces of Nat set. I've actually found Jade Harvesters, I found the Monkey King set, but I've only ever found one piece of Marauders, so that is the one that's currently just refusing to drop for me. Before, I would say the Cinder Coat, but I have since gotten one, so I can't use that one as a crutch any longer.
And Kendala can be awfully flimsy. One day she could spit out set items at you left and right, and not Troll Thorns, actual set items. And next days you just get pages of rares.
That is where that I got my trifecta mage fist from. So yeah, she was kind to me last week.
Yeah. All right, and moving on to the last question, which I thought would be a fitting ending to this segment. Favorite lore point anywhere in the Diablo franchise?
Anywhere in the Diablo franchise. That one requires a little bit of thought.
It's a big, vast world of Sanctuary out there.
Yeah, and there are a lot of things. I can't really name one in particular, because there's the ending battle between like Zale and I'm gonna mispronounce his name. It was Cadabrix, I think it was, is another necromancer at the end of the Moon of the Spider, with like summoning a demon in the background and like ripping out part of his soul, but then he kept it in a familiar and all this other type of stuff. It was wonderful, like very, fantasy high magic archetype like battle going through and happening all on the basis of a demon and a very powerful demons being summoned into Sanctuary, while Westmarch is being overrun with thousands of spider demons and such. That was a very particular awesome moment, as was of course the ending of the Kingdom of Shadow, with like Zale trying to destroy this crystal in the caverns underneath, being assaulted by hundreds of demonically possessed undead, with the I can't remember his name now, but with the other hero climbing the top of a mountain, having the a mile tall vision of Diablo coming to reach for him and such. Just very powerful moments, and it's very hard for me to try and choose one out of all of those, but that's a tough one. That was a tough one.
Well, if you want, we can go with those.
Yeah, we can go with those, or I don't know. We could go with something. We could go with let's see. We could or I could just go and fall back on. Let's just say it was dang it, what's his name? I want to say Lannister now, but that's not it, because I've just been watching too much Game of Thrones. But I think it was Lister. Dang it, I can't remember. He was the potion vendor in Act 2, and he is just like a little joke when you come and talk to him about a quest. And instead of saying Horizon's journal, he thought you were searching for Horizon's urinal. That one probably. I'll go with that. I'll go with that answer.
Good old pot of humor for the
yes. The discovery of Horizon's urinal was my favorite lore moment in Diablo. Lystander, that's it. Lystander.
Lystander. All right, we got it. We pulled it from the depths of memory.
In Google.
Oh, yes. Good old Google. All right, so we have gone through the woods of the best of times and worst times, and we have made it to the dining room table. That is the main discussion topic. We made it, folks. We got here. Thank you for staying with us on this wonderful journey. Alright, now I'm going to... okay, spoilers for those of you who have not gotten Reaper Souls or have not gotten all the way through. A very quick roundup of what happens. Essentially, Methel comes back as the Angel of Death from his previous position as the Archangel of Wisdom. And he has taken control of the Black Soulstone, which was released at the end of the Diablo 3 cinematic when you killed Diablo. And it fell into what appeared to be in all the sketches the main consoling room of the Angiris console. And Tyrael saw that something was not right with the console. There was more bickering and arguing what to do with it, so he hatched his own plan, and he basically reformed the Heraldic Order down on Sanctuary, and with them he found a place on Sanctuary to hide the Black Soul Stone. But unfortunately, hiding things, no matter how good the hiding place, you will always be found out, and Methel came to Westmarch, got the Black Soul Stone, and started his plans on purging all the Nephilim, because if you do not know, the Nephilim are always part demon and part angel. And for the Eternal Conflict to end, which was the main end goal of Methel, he wanted to purge all demons, and us poor Nephilim are caught in the middle, and we are part demon, so we have to go. You can't stay here, folks, but you have to go die over there. You're like, stuff like that. So, skip through all the lore points. That's when it'll spoil everything. You get to the end, and you kill Methel. but during the fight, he gets a little desperate, or he, because he doesn't, I don't know if it's ever pointed out if he actually thinks he can control the Black Soul Stone and the 7 prime evils that are caught in it now.
I actually have the answer for that one.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah,
so
this actually goes back, and I asked that very same question, or a similar question to it, to the lead writer, Brian Kindergan, during the anniversary stream, because I got to do the lore portion over there, and there was a little bit more that had kind of been written into that fight originally, but it had to be cut back from kind of like a time and budgetary reasons, and to not make it as it was hard to do it in the concept that they wanted to. But the audio files were in there that after Malthael took in the Black Soul Stone, at first it sounded like, because you only had the audio aspect, that the primeval were taking him over and were like possessing him as he went through and continued to fight you through the various phases. So you might have a Bale phase where he gained additional attacks based off of like the Bale fight, and then you'd have a Mephisto phase where he'd gain lightning bolts or poison clouds and such. And it would kind of change up and have like these very specific phases, and he would take on kind of like that aspect. But what it is, since we only ever got that little snippet, we never saw what they were intending that to be. And he answered the question, it wasn't so much that they were taking him over, but it was more that he was channeling that individual power from the Soul Stone through himself. And that Malthael was actually indeed more than capable of actually controlling the Black Soul Stone and the primeval contained within. Because they didn't get separated into their individual entities. It was still just the single primeval in Diablo and trapped inside the Black Soul Stone. But Malthael didn't actually know. It was a big gambit on his end when he destroyed the Black Soul Stone of whether he'd be able to control those energies, but he ended up being able to. He was more powerful than all of the primevals combined because he had absorbed so much energy from all the souls in Sanctuary, and he was able to then not only take his own power of being a member of the Angios Council, and then the power of the thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of millions of Nephilim souls that he was able to take and absorb into himself to become something else entirely. Then he absorbs the power of the primeval into himself as well, and uses all of that, and still is defeated by the Nephilim. So that is kind of like the power that our character has gotten up to that point, and just the power of what we were fighting when we fought Malthael. Once he took the Black Soul Stone into himself, he was in complete control. He was manipulating the power of the primeval to his own whims.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thank you. I actually learned. I did not know that it was Diablo. That it was still Diablo the primeval, not the 7 separate evils. So I remember very loosely hearing, but I didn't want to spread misinformation. But thank you. See, this is why it's great to have a lore expert and someone who cares about this on the show.
There's answers for everything.
Yes. But yeah, so eventually you kill Malthael, but of course, with that comes a grave consequence. When he broke apart the Black Soul Stone, he is like anything else in Diablo history. Whenever you break that shard, poof, you set loose.
Bad things inevitably follow.
Yeah, so it's like we won, and we're instantly back in the next war. Whether we know it or not, while it's actually here or not, Diablo is free once again. Apparently his knowledge is a little bit more, or he had more faith in us than the Angios Council did, which is kind of a weird thought when you process that. It's like, I'm going to be beaten, but if I'm beaten, there's no way that a puny angel will stand up to these Nephilim. And then the real plan shall begin. And that's where we're at right now. So I will leave the floor open to you, and I'll just give you a guideline. I'll chime in if I have a fun moment. But knowing that our Nephilim, are now being looked in awe of our power for what our meager lifetime is, because we're still mortals. We're just Nephilim. And the world of Sanctuary, by the demons and now the nearest console. If you had to take best guesses, like, where do you think our characters are going to go, and what could influence our characters? Because, like I said in the lead up into the segment, that may be where they may bring back a particular class or give us a whole new one, and that's going to revolve around the story in some way. So where do you think they can go with all this information that we know now?
That is, of course, the big question, because it was left as a very, wide open door at the end of Reaper of Souls, with Tyrael, who has always been our steadfast ally, going through and for the first time really questioning, is one being so powerful really a good thing? When they can be tempted so easily. He's, asking the same questions that Malthael asked himself, when he came to the decision that humanity needed to be exterminated. Obviously, I guess it's a fluffy lore, but the Rifts is pseudo what's going on in the world, kind of like now, and so we kind of see it is and it isn't. It isn't hard lore, but it kind of is. This is post Malthael dying, and Tyrael is still our ally, and the Heraldric Order is growing. So obviously he hasn't turned his back on us, but it just is like that kind of like that telling feel that, how are the angels going to view us now? We defeated the primeval and we helped save heaven, but we were the ones that endangered it in the first place, and we're a reckless, loose cannon type thing. But then we killed Malthael, who is, was questionably one of the strongest of the angels, being a member of the Angiris Council, and everyone deferred to his judgment. But then he became more than just that by absorbing all of the souls, and then finally absorbing the Black Soul Stone, that if we weren't there, he would have been the most powerful entity that had been seen in all of creation, and yet we were able to put him down. So now it's like this thing that we're not so much like the gem. We're not the treasure chest. We're not the object that heaven and hell are fighting over any longer. And what I think that they're going to take the story in kind of a direction in the future is, we're now a player at the table. We're no longer just the little thing that we're going to be fought over. We're now going to be fighting in the eternal conflict. We're going to kind of be there, fighting for our own survival, or whatever direction they kind of turn the story. Are heaven and hell going to join forces and fight against us, or are we going to, are they not going to join forces, but still they both think that we need to be eliminated, and so we're fighting for our own survival? Or is there kind of going to be kind of this uneasy Mexican standoff in the eternal conflict, between heaven, hell, and sanctuary, because there's kind of draw there of us being eyed, because the World Stone is still missing. It's only briefly mentioned in Reaper of Souls, but apparently it was like this really huge thing in the background lore, that this is what the entire eternal conflict was being fought over, was the World Stone and being in control of it. And once Tyrael destroyed it, it's not really been mentioned ever so much since. Metzen kind of mentioned at a BlizzCon that it was still around, just not like a physical sense. You can't really destroy it, but that kind of storyline that they wanted to do with that narrative got canned, and they ended up going with a different narrative, with it's being the Black Soul Stone being central in that. But it's still kind of out there as an idea, obviously, because they started talking about it in Reaper of Souls. And so that might come into effect in a future expansion, that we might see the resurgence of the World Stone. And so, it might be all three of us kind of going through and fighting for that power. The angels and demons continuing to fight over the World Stone, because it's what they've always fought over. It's what they've always wanted. And there could be some sort of story element of why, the Nephilim, humanity, might be wanting to fight fight to get the World Stone. It might be something along the lines, well, if either the angels or demons get the World Stone, Sanctuary will be destroyed because of it. So we have to fight for our own survival in order to keep it. We have to hold it. We have to keep it away from each of those forces and kind of like be the eternal guardians or something along those lines. But it's really difficult to say.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Sure.
Now that you say that, like, I've never thought about that in that kind of perspective of where, like, when you said the phrase, like, we would be equal at the table among the angels and demons. Like, just imagining like a screwed up version of Arthur's court, and just seeing like the Angiers Council, and just seeing like the seven evils at the other side, and us just staring up at them, but them looking at us with like glaring eyes, are like they just want to squash us with their foot, but they know they can't.
Yeah, and that was.
And what you say like kind of rings true. Like, if they do try to bring back the World Stone, like even in like a weird pseudo like WoW, like the World Tree, like, oh, here's another World Stone out of poof thin air, or it'll come back on its own, like however they decide to. I guess I don't know if it would be considered retconning, but if they decide to make some kind of law, like it comes back, or it can, like I said, or how it can never actually die, but it's like a metaphysical object now, and you can always try to bring it back. A storyline where we're fighting for our, just, to get the World Stone for control, to guard it, just to make ourselves invisible again to the outside influences. I could definitely see that being a more of a possibility than not, because then the angels and demons will be going at it like they have been for eternity, trying to get it. As long as we protect it, we keep ourselves safe, and then we just have to deal with our own internal conflict on the inside. There's a lot of metaphors there. The eternal conflict on the outside, on the inside. I like it. I like what you just wrote.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of potential there, and I mean that's only one possibility too, because there's a bunch of story hooks that were left at the end of the original Diablo that weren't touched on at all, such as Leah's soul and her redemption. That was still something that they only hinted at a little bit when you went to fight Adria as kind of being revenge for Leah's death. But at the end of Diablo 3, Tyrael was saying, to the hero, and they both were agreeing that we would do anything. We would go to any ends. We would go through hell in order to bring back Leah's soul, or at least give her rest, peace, or give some sort of redemption to her. And now that Diablo is released out of the Black Soul Stone, that from what was kind of said during that lore panel during the anniversary stream, they didn't say that Diablo was actually released. They stayed away from explicitly saying that the Black Soul Stone has been shattered, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the primeval is free. He might still be locked away, but if he were to ever escape from that prison, he wouldn't go back to being the 7 individual lords of hell. That it would still be the primeval. So there might be, some like little story hook from that as well. Of we might be racing against the clock because some of the other like minor demon lords, like there's the 5 other lieutenants of sin from Asmodan, as well as any number of minor demon lords that they could go through and come up with, that is racing through Pandemonium, or maybe some of the Black Soul Stone, is still trapped in Pandemonium. Maybe some fell to hell. Maybe some rose up to heaven after Malthael was killed. We don't know what happened to those shards. And it's kind of a race against the clock to find all of them before some demon lord can put them all together and suddenly unleash Diablo again.
Yeah, and that's also another good plot device, because there was always that I forgot what they called it, but like the Black Soulstone shimmer, like the one that Tyrael had, the
sliver.
Yeah, like we have that piece, and that just seems like another plausible storyline. Although I can't help but be reminisce about Inuyasha and the stone and getting all the crystal fragments. Like, it would just seem like a weird plot device from there. But it makes sense because because it's like, okay, the Black Soul Stone has a whole bunch of these demon souls locked up. Okay, like let's set them free. Let's just do it that way. So yeah, I can definitely see that. It's like there are still so many bringing back Zoltan for like a third time.
That would be awesome. That's like one of those lore questions that's never been answered. Okay, all right, hold on. Zoltan Kuhl is supposed to be immortal, and we bring him back to life and then kill him 30 seconds later, and then he's just gone. How is he actually dead? Shouldn't he still actually be alive and is just like a talking head in a pile of sand or something? Shouldn't he still be down there, cursing us or whatever? Because it's just he's immortal, he can't be killed, blah blah blah. I punch him 3 times and now he's gone. That doesn't make sense. I'd love to see Zoltan Kuhl came back. He was like the one good guy in the story, through all of Diablo 3 Classic. It had no real reason, even right when we went to kill him, he's just sitting there. It's like, oh shit, all the demon lords of hell just got sucked into the Black Soul Stone. I didn't do this. Someone's playing you for a fool. One of your allies is going to betray you, and then you're like, I'm gonna kill you, Kuhl. It doesn't make any sense. He's trying to warn us, and then we fight him. It's just like, that's horrible. That's bad. Yeah. He's on our side. He's on the side of humanity. Although he, murdered and tortured hundreds of people in order to learn all these things, and he's a downright evil person. But he's on our side.
He's one of ours. Damn it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think Zoltan Kuhl can be qualified as like the Lord Voldemort of our game. He never quite goes away. He'll always be there in one fashion or another.
The archives were merely a setback.
Yeah, really. But yeah, it's like on top of all that, it's like there's like the general theme of it's like, okay, usually there's throughout games, like when you have the main base game, and also you have X game and X game 2, X game 3, X game 3 expansion number 2. You expect to be there to be a natural progression in the power of your character and the power of what you're fighting. So, even though we've just gone over a couple of possibilities, what do you think we'll be fighting that's left in the lore to be discovered? Would it be I know we haven't even really touched on, I'm gonna butcher her name, Lilith, or however I say it.
Oh, you got it right.
Okay, good for me.
Mm-hmm.
I get that point back from earlier. But also, Talmech, and Anu, and things of legend and story,
mm-hmm.
and maybe even avatars or shades or however they could be done. Do you think we'll get there, or do you think it almost seems like a redundant question, but do you think we'll get up to that kind of that class of powerful enemies, or do you think we'll still see more or less what we've been seeing, just more beefier, Siegebreaker, oh poof, it's dead, that kind of deal?
I mean, there's going to be that type of thing. There's of course going to be the endless hordes of small creatures that we'll stomp on, followed by the kind of the next up, the lieutenants and such, some more powerful entities, which they can always pull something from, because hell is kind of meant to be endless. And the only reason why hell hasn't walked over heaven is because they always fight amongst themselves. And so they can never bring their full strength to bear against the heavens, and that's why they've always managed to kind of stalemate throughout all of eternity. There's things like the Mallet Lords. The lore behind the Mallet Lords, and the reason why we had never seen them before, is because the primevals were the only ones that they would ever yield to. That would be the Baal, Mephisto, and Diablo. They didn't give a shit about the lesser evils, even though they were next in line and they're still the part of the ruling council. And Dariel, Duriel, Asmodan, and Belial all meant nothing to them. They were, they were that powerful in the realms of hell that they just kind of stayed on the outside and did whatever they wanted to. But once, Diablo came back and had made himself the primeval, that's when they heeded his call and were summoned into heaven. And they would listen to him. But there has to be other types of demons out there of equal strength and power that we've just never heard of, or that they could always come up and create, that is going to be kind of on that same level. There's always something out there. There's and then on the other side of it, if we're going to be fighting heaven, obviously you have the Anguirus Council, which would all be of strength and abilities somewhat similar to Malthael, just downplayed a little bit, because when we fought him, obviously he was supercharged on Nephilim Soul steroids, but you have like the elite angels who are known as the Sicarii, which are like kind of referred to as world destroyers, that they can just brutalize anything that in existence, and they were the ones that they would send to kill these lords of hell during combat and such. So there's definitely these big things out there that we can still go through and fight, that might still pose as a minor challenge, because obviously the overarching narrative is that we overcome everything. But then some of the names that you mentioned before, Anu as well as Tathamet, that is kind of, you can't really get anything above that. Obviously Tathamet looks like it'd be a little bit more realistic of a bad guy, because that is a bad guy. I don't remember if it's a he or a she or an it. But it is the original incarnation of evil. It was the 7-headed dragon that, when it was slayed, each one of the individual heads formed the 7 greater evils. And Diablo taking all of the evils into the Black Soul Stone and creating the Primeval was an attempt to bring back that kind of that nefarious entity of Tathamet, but kind of fell short. So there's always something that maybe once the Primeval, learning that he got all this power and tried to just do a blitzkrieg through heaven, maybe if he does get released from the Black Soul Stone in the next expansion, that he now kind of goes back and falls in the plan of, well, maybe we need to rack it up another notch and try to channel more of the power of Tathamet into himself, which would more or less be kind of just absorbing more demons, because the Black Soul Stone has that ability. And so it could be something that is just trying to collect some of the broken fragments of the Black Soul Stone and absorbing more demons into it, but it has like something that's unstable, and so they kind of spill out as these combined monstrosities. There's so many things within the lore that you can do in that respect. With it's hard to even say what. These are just things that I'm thinking of with the lore that I have access to and the story components that I have access to, compared to what the people internally at Blizzard, who are, they're professional writers that do this for a living, instead of just reading stuff on the internet. And all the archives that they have in the Blizzard library, the Blizzard historians, that they have under lock and key. So it's almost hard to say what they couldn't do, really.
Yeah, it really is amazing stuff, and as you give idea after idea, my third eye or inner eye or ideas on and just the scope and scale of Sanctuary are continually blown away one by one. It's like, no, this really is a big lore. I think people don't give it enough credit, but just because they play through, because Diablo is a much quicker game, I would say, compared to StarCraft and especially World of Warcraft, and even the RTS games of Warcraft, that you almost kind of lose how you almost get a false sense of it's shallow when it really isn't. You just have to do a little bit more digging on your own. Oh,
by and far, there's so much depth to the lore in the Diablo games. And it's so surprising that once you start digging deep, there's all these additional levels. I think a lot of that also comes from the way that they wrote the novels. And the majority of the novels for the Diablo series were written from the points of views of people that were never in any of the games. And they were just world building. And the early writers were kind of given a lot of free rein to try and flesh out what it was like to be in Sanctuary. What is the constant threats that it is that goes on in Sanctuary, and how important of a world this place actually is, instead of trying to focus on some character from the actual game or whatever and kind of warp the narrative around there. They were just given free rein to kind of write whatever they wanted to, of course under their direction, Blizzard's direction that is, to just build a world and have places and people and history that you of course don't get entirely through the game itself, but is complemented by it. You go through and you might read one of the books, the book number 1, Legacy of Blood, and a lot of the things that you'll go through and you'll talk about, and you'll be like, oh yeah, Horizon, I remember him, we were in the Arcane Sanctuary. And Bartok, well, he's one of the people that was in Throne that Bale summoned, in the Throne of Destruction. Oh my god, that was Bartok, that was his soul that's being imprisoned in hell for all these thousands of years. It's kind of like some of those really like little tiny moments, so they kind of build into it that kind of give you those like, hey, I know what that is, or I know what that's from, or that's awesome when you make those connections. And it's really nice that they did the original novels that way. With the last couple of ones, it's been more of actually having a narrative to tell, but they haven't really backed away from any of that world building. And so even some of those novels that are particularly about Tyrael or Deckard or Leah, such as The Order and Storm of Light, they still go to great lengths to try and build up the world that we haven't seen. The cities or places or experiences that we don't get in the games. And so it makes for a very kind of fulfilling experience, because they all have little tie-ins that you can see or notice. One of my biggest things in the Order was, Deckard Cain goes back to Kurost, about 10 years after we were there in Diablo 2. What became of that capital after it had been completely enslaved by Mephisto, and then all the demons there slaughtered by the heroes of Diablo 2 as we went through. That place just doesn't get erased off the map. Something happens to it. There's people that were living there. What happened to Kurost? What does it become 10 years in the future? And the fact that they go back and did little things like that just made it a very interesting place, and feels like it's actually being lived in. And it's one of the things that's really made me latch onto the lore in Diablo more so than like the StarCraft or the Warcraft franchises.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's nice when there's revisiting. I know. Well, I think WoW has everything. There's always constant revisiting, revising, and everything. So it's a good example, yet not. But I like when they do it, because there seems to be this overarching concept for all three of the major franchises, where there's like it's like 10,000 years back in the past with World of Warcraft and the War of the Ancients, and like when Illidan and all these major lore characters are back there, and you have the eternal conflict with Anu and I'll defer to your pronunciation. It was Anu and
Tathamet.
Tathamek. Okay, I should never get that wrong now. And how they existed in the Pearl, and how they both came to being, constantly fighting, and then the Pearl exploded, and then all this like alternate view of like Big Bang Theory and creation of the universe and all this other stuff, and then the angels and demons, eternal conflict. This is all before even Sanctuary was created, and StarCraft with the Azil Naga and how they created the Protoss as the firstborn, and then the Xur came after why the Overmind was created because of the failed Protoss experiment, how the Terrans were natural born in themselves, and all this millennia and eras of war before you finally start playing the game itself. There seems to be this like pre-existing universe of such scope and scale with all these games, and just in this conversation, I just love how much I've learned and all the ideas I never would have thought of or contemplated, or rather nice. And it's a breath of fresh air, because now I feel like there's always more to learn, and it's a great thing. But with that, as we start coming to a close, but I still want to ask this one question. We'll try to keep it on a shorter answer time.
Mm-hmm.
We'll try.
I'll give it a shot. No promises.
Yeah, it's okay. Looking forward to the expansion. Taking whatever idea they have is. Now, the Necromancer and the Druid kind are the classic picks. I always see people picking out like Druid, Necromancer, Druid. But is there a particular class that you see may have a touch of lore behind it more than another class? Of the ones that we've either been able to play or one that you may like that may have like I said, a touch more credit to coming back in a future Diablo 3 expansion?
All right. This one is going to be a two-part answer. So this one is basically
that's fine.
Yeah, this is going to be my answer and my thoughts on it, and then kind of like the reality check. So this is what it is. The Necromancer, if you had never played any of the Diablo games and had only read the novels, you would think that the Necromancers are the heroes of Sanctuary. The Necromancers have probably some of the most in-depth lore about them and their kind and their lifestyle and how they do things and their abilities than any other class in the Diablo games themselves. Even up until now, when they haven't been included in Diablo 3 at all, they still get mentions in the new novels. They have, Zale gets a cameo in the Storm of Light, and we get to see kind of things from the Necromancer's point of view in that novel, as well as they've been the stars of half of the other novels that have been written in the Diablo world anyways. So they are probably one of the ones that have some of the most concrete information about them, as well as some of the most backing to be an obvious pick for what the next class might be from that kind of lore aspect. We know the most about them. They're one of the most easily recognizable ones in the game. Even though you couldn't play them, they even had cameos in Diablo 2 or Diablo 3 and Reaper of Souls. And so it's just one of those ones that are kind of like the poster child of Diablo, almost in a sense, because they're one of the ones that continue to get mentioned and brought up again and again, both in the game and in literature. But then now for the second part of it and kind of the reality check on that is what we were told, about the creation of the Crusader. And there is the concept of what they kind of want the class to do that kind of came about first, that then they had the major bulk of the storyline of the tale they wanted to tell in the expansion in Reaper of Souls. And so they wanted to have another strength-based class that was kind of tanky and kind of like, just like this huge juggernaut type character. Because they feel the barbarian was just kind of like this ravaged, brutish, berserker that cuts through all of his enemies. But they wanted this like, walking mountain type thing that just slowly trudges across the battlefield, obliterates everything in his path. And because they're going to Westmarch, and it had kind of like that gothic European feel, they felt that they could go and do a paladin, but then they wanted it to be grittier, and it kind of evolved into the Crusader. So lore and backstory was created around the class and the class concept instead of being the other way around. The class didn't come from pre-existing lore or a tale that they wanted to tell. They had a class they wanted to make, and then they made the story fit it more or less. So that unfortunately is kind of a insight into the design development behind the game itself. So obviously we can go through and try and look for the writing on the wall and all those types of stuff, and what might be in the next class that gets released. But unfortunately, it kind of comes down to a whole bunch of variables that we have no knowledge of whatsoever, because they could really take the story in any number of directions, and that will throw around the ideas of what it is they want to address or what they want to add to the game. So, and as we saw with the Crusader, they don't have to base anything on pre-existing lore, because, well, I mean, they're creating and writing the games, so they can do anything that they want and write a new class to come off, into it. I'm one of those people that's Team Necromancer. I want to see them added back into the game as a playable class, because that was bar none my favorite class in Diablo 2, and I would love to be able to play one as again. But, kind of after learning that design decisions behind the Crusader, I guess I'm not holding my breath, for what they might do as far as the next class, because it really is open to anything, and is based more on where the main storyline is going, and they'll kind of custom tailor whatever class they add in to match that.
Yeah, it definitely is a game, and well, it's a lesson in the game development. Definitely everything you said was said, and how they just wanted this block of steel to be charging down the field, and they kind of wrote that's why they decided to use Westmarch as the focal point of the epicenter, if you call it, of this new war that we were going on. And yeah, I mean, and especially it kind of another, I don't want to say nail in a coffin, which is a very funny pun once you think about it, for the Necromancer, is the fact that the Witch Doctor has kind of developed into this pseudo mass pet build that you can have, you can have like as many as almost 20 pets on screen, and they're just going at it for you. So
definitely, they kind of fill that same niche that the Necromancer has. There's not a lot of room of what they could potentially do with a Necromancer to add him back in and make his gameplay varied from the Witch Doctor.
Yeah, so I guess if we were to go with one of your lore points, or lore ideas, if we are equal partners in the world of Sanctuary, and we are going to call this, ball of created dirt our own, maybe it will be Druid. They'll be able to tap into strength or dex or intellect at their own whim, and just communicate with this world and either heal it, or there may be new characters that would be essential for either creation of a physical world stone from what was hinted at, the metaphysical version. I go along with that, and it would be a dynamically different class. They wouldn't they would also have to go into if they're only gives one class. I would imagine they would have to quell the reality. If people will go we have a third strength class, or a third int class, or a third dex class. Why not just make one that can be them all?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely the possibility of that, and having a couple of different builds, in mind. That would be a nightmare to try and balance from a class design aspect. But that does briefly go into one of my theories when Reaper Souls was first announced, before the Crusader was announced or shown off. And that was that they might have it was also a shape-shifting class, and it would be a Nephilim demon hybrid, and it was based off a lot of the stuff that they had done with the Demon Hunter prior to the launch of Diablo 3 that they talked about a lot at previous BlizzCons. Is the Demon Hunter had a very interesting development path, and at one point, even though it was supposed to be the kind of archetype ranger archer type class, at one point it had kind of worked its way into this strength-based, shape-shifting melee fighter because he had been, it seems like the product of a human and a demon, and so he has this very powerful demon aspect of him, and that's why he's a demon hunter, but he channels that power so that way he can kill demons, and he can like shape-shift into a demon and all the other types of things. And they had apparently gotten really far in the development of this beyond the concept art stage, and actually been developing skills and abilities for it, and they realized that they were just so far off base from what they wanted to achieve with this class that it had to be scrapped and start over from scratch, And so I was kind of thinking that it'd be interesting because they could do it as a strength-based class, so they were lacking parity between all the stat classes at the time, and would add a shape-shifting class that a lot of people were asking for, and bringing the druid back that would give it a different type of gameplay than anything else that was there in the game at the moment. And it would also use a lot of things that they had spent development time and money on, and so it'd be at least find fiscally responsible in that aspect. They could build upon something that they had already done, ground or foundation that they had already laid. And but obviously that got thrown out the window because they had already long since decided on the Crusader with what they wanted to fill with it. But that was just one of my ideas that I had out there. But it would be very interesting that they could potentially do something. You have a Nephilim that can channel both his inner demon and inner angel to change back and forth between the forms, and then how you could play that into maybe using the different stats or benefiting partially from all of them, or how that might work. It'd be that would be hell to try and balance, but it would be pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, definitely. Like I can imagine it, so it can't be that complex. But yeah, the balance people would be pulling their definitely on that one.
That one is for that one's for Wyatt Chang and Travis Day to try and figure out.
Yeah, let alone itemization and all that fun stuff. All right, so I think we're pretty much at the end of our story here, unless there's anything you felt that we did not go over.
I guess there's one little thing that I'd like to add for one of the questions that you sent to me that we didn't really answer so much, and kind of skipped over because I talk way too much. I'm sorry about that. But it's one of the ones was the implication of Rebirth Souls on the world of Sanctuary. And I just wanted to go through and touch on that one. It's something that a lot of people kind of glaze over because you're just smashing the spacebar to try and get through all of the little hand-drawn cinematics in order to get to the end and get your loot. But everything that was happening in Westmarch wasn't just Westmarch. It was happening all over Sanctuary. It's happening all over the world. So we're talking almost every single city, town, and village had one of these soul crucibles that was killing hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of people across the entire globe. And the actual extent of how many people have died in Sanctuary, I tried asking that question, I didn't get an answer, and it was just, we might be kind of an endangered species now. There might we don't know how many humans are left out there in the world, because this happened, everywhere. Not just in Chaldeum, but in Galkul, and that happened in Lut Ghilain, it happened in Kingsport, it happened in Janzai, the wizard homelands and such. And it's just it's like there's no place in Sanctuary that wasn't affected by this, and so there's a lot of people dead out there, and so it's not a nice place to be in right now.
A lot of lore for those necromancers to come back in.
yeah.
It's like, there's a peg for the necromancers, but they'll probably just be supporting roles again. Just a little bit bigger numbers, bringing everyone back to life in one way or another. All right, so with that, we'll bring this Scythe and Shield to a close. You can catch us at GrindExp.com, on Twitter at GrindExp, Facebook GrindExp. Like I say every time, and we'll say every time, I made this real easy. Try to find us everywhere, especially on YouTube this time. Neinball, where can people find you?
Obviously, you can find me over at diablo.blizzpro.com. I'm the managing editor over there, so you can see some of my columns and articles from time to time. And obviously, you can catch Archon and myself on Westmarch Workshop, our podcast, Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, at 6 p.m. Pacific, over on Twitch. It's twitch.tv/Archon the Wizard. You can catch us live, or you can catch us over at Archon's Inferno Archon Inferno Friday on YouTube in order to find the post live episodes. And you can also follow us on iTunes and Stitcher. You just search for Westmarch Workshop. And then finally, if you're just looking for the inane nonsense that I babble all the time, you can follow me on Twitter at Neingball and I talk about random stuff, so you can follow me there.
Yes, I do, and I enjoy it.
Oh, and also I still have to give props out over to Flux at Ink Gamers for really helping me out and helping me become part of the Diablo community. So I have to give him some credit out there as well, and obviously the entire staff over at Ink Gamers for continuing to let me be on their podcasts and such. So Rush and LA also, thanks a lot for helping me be a part of your little family over there and helping me get started.
Yes, all very good. Nice to know that the community, after all the trials and tribulations, is still healthy and strong and getting stronger. So, with that, thank you for being part of the Scythe and Shield. Very honored to have you.
I am honored to be here.
And I wish you all out there in podcast land, listeners and alike, have a good night, and we will see you next time.
Bye.